Well, first of all, thanks so much for inviting me. As many of you know, I returned from Haiti and really felt the need to go back. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been seeing the world in many ways through the prism of all the events that I saw in Haiti. You couldn't go there and not be overwhelmed by the scope of the tragedy and the suffering. Traveling around Port-au-Prince, the devastation truly overwhelmed the senses. All the sights, the sounds, the smells, buildings collapsed, the dead and the injured. The immensity of this national tragedy was really too much to take in all at once. When you look closer, though, Haiti was and is thousands and thousands of smaller tragedies. Families losing mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. It really was very heartbreaking. The earthquake in Haiti took thousands of lives in an instant. We know that now. Thousands more died in the hours and days that followed, and despite the best intentions of people all over the world, as I was traveling here today, I was thinking about drug and alcohol addiction, obviously, as well. Haiti was not far from my mind as I think about these things. I think in many ways these things are not so different. The earthquake took lives, it destroyed families, rich and poor, educated and illiterate, black and white. Addiction does the same thing in many ways. It destroys lives, it destroys families. Addiction as well cuts across class, education, and race. Addiction just moves much slower than an earthquake. Addiction is like an earthquake in slow motion. And there's something else to this as well, and something I believe. Like an earthquake, addiction is a force of nature. It's biological. You can actually see addiction in the brain scans of addicts. I'll talk more about the biology of addiction in just a moment, but recognition of addiction as a brain disease is starting to change the way we in the medical community approach this problem. Being CNN's medical correspondent, a job that often far away from home, I do continue to practice medicine. I'm a neurosurgeon at Emory University, and Mondays I go to the operating room at Grady Hospital. I have clinic on Wednesdays. My cases usually involve trying to treat conditions that you can see. Tumors, clots, aneurysms. The job is challenging and it's rewarding. It's also a frequent reminder of just how incredibly complex and fascinating the brain really is. Do you know there's more neuronal connections in the brain than there are stars in the universe? For most of human history, the brain has been something of a black box. So it wasn't hard for behaviors to be taken as signs of personal, even spiritual character. As you all know, for centuries, addiction was seen as a moral failing or a weakness of character. And not surprisingly, addiction came with a lot of shame, not only for the addict, but for the addict's family as well. Now, as brain imaging gets better, we're learning more and more about how the brain really works with respect to this. Functional MRI, for example, allows doctors and researchers to follow a brain's response in real time. In fact, brain imaging is so good now, you can actually see a thought being formed. And that makes this an exciting time to consider addiction. An addict's brain looks different in three ways. One is something known as the prefrontal cortex. That's the front of the brain. It's the most evolved part of our brain, right behind the forehead. We need that orbital frontal cortex for decision making, what we call executive function. Now, in an addict's brain, it's damaged, or it seems to be. It's a physical difference that you can see, and it could lead to a loss of willpower. In the brain of a meth addict, for example, there's actually a 7 to 10% less gray matter in this part of the brain. You can actually see less activity there as well in the brain scans of meth addicts. This is the part of the brain that normally handles impulses and our ability not to give in to them. It's what researchers like to call inhibitory control. Basically, that your brain should tell you something is not a good idea, it's not always happening. Another key spot in addiction, something known as the amygdala. It's further back, it's lower down, small and almond-shaped. It's on either side of the brain. One thing the amygdala does is handle emotional, if not very precise memories. If you see a stick in the woods and your heart starts racing because you think it might be a snake, that's the amygdala. It's almost like a gut reaction. The other thing the amygdala does, and this is relevant to addiction, is it handles stress. The amygdala overreacts to stress. You could say it's hyperactive. That brings on a powerful craving. Think of it as the dark side of addiction. The amygdala produces an anxiety that can only be relieved by drugs and alcohol sometimes. Researchers have looked at the brains of meth addicts early on in the recovery process, and they are depressed, they are anxious, and both of those states of mind can actually be measured by the excessive activity in the amygdala. Third area of the brain involved in addiction, something known as the nucleus accumbens. This is toward the front of the brain. It's small, but it's a really important place. That's where all these chemicals like dopamine trigger a sense of good feeling or goodwill or good reward. The receptors of an addict's brain overreact to drugs or alcohol, but they underreact to normal pleasure. In an addict, the whole reward system is sort of thrown off. Your normal brain chemistry is disrupted, creating a growing dependence. In the end, you'll have fear and stress responses even in the absence of any relevant events that would normally produce fear or stress. And you might feel miserable in the absence of drugs. That provides a strong incentive to relapse. When you talk to people who are addicts, you can't help but conclude there is some genetic component as well. For one thing, alcoholism does seem to run in families. For another, people can face the same set of circumstances, the same stimuli, if you will, and react completely differently. One person can have a drink or two, call it a night. Someone else might have that first drink and simply not be able to stop. I really wish that I could be with you today because I have so much to say about this particular topic, but I do want to applaud the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. As a doctor, as a father, it's reassuring to know that your organization is out there training local groups and developing a comprehensive plan to address substance abuse problems. The cost of addiction to individuals, families, communities remains way too high, and your organization has an emphasis on substance abuse prevention, which is very admirable. It's organizations like yours that's going to help us stop this slow motion earthquake from ever hitting another generation. Thanks again. Good luck.